Well, let's get Labour's view, should we? Shadow International Trade Secretary Nick Thomas-Symonds is here with us now. Hi.
Hi, good to join you.
As always. The Prime Minister followed due process.
Well, the Prime Minister has serious questions now to answer. We know from Sir Lawrie Magnus's report that in July of last year, Mr Zahawi declared on his ministerial declaration that he was under investigation by HMRC. We also know that in September of last year, he came to a settlement rather with HMRC that involved paying a penalty. And yet, at the end of October, the Prime Minister actually put him in a very senior position in his cabinet. He must, at the very least, have known about the declaration from the previous July, that Mr Zahawi was under investigation. So why on earth did the Prime Minister appoint him to cabinet at that time? And why, by the way, with the penalty having been paid in September, did the Prime Minister preside over a situation where that was not declared by Mr Zahawi until this month? There are now very serious questions to this Prime Minister, who actually promised integrity, he promised accountability, but that isn't what he is delivering. Instead, he's been weak, he's vacillated, and he's once again put party before country.
He's also an incredibly busy man. We are basically at war in Europe. We've got a problem with the National Health Service, not enough beds at creaking point. We've got a crisis as far as our economy is concerned. We've got an energy crisis. You can't be pouring through stuff like that at bedtime.
Every single Prime Minister, when they appoint somebody to their cabinet, has that conversation, and there's a process that has to be gone through for that person to be appointed. That would have happened with Nadhim Zahawi, as it would have happened with other appointments to the cabinet. This is a Prime Minister who has claimed to put ethics and standards at the very top of his priority list, but it's pretty clear that that isn't the case. And the Prime Minister now must come out and tell us openly what he knew when about Mr Zahawi and what he knew when Mr Zahawi was appointed to his cabinet, and also what questions he asked of him before appointing him to such a senior position.
But if Mr Zahawi was economical with the actuality as far as the Prime Minister is concerned, that's not his fault.
Well, we don't know the nature of the conversation. We do know from Sir Lawrie Magnus's report that in the July, Mr Zahawi had declared that he was under investigation by HMRC. Now, that should have been in itself a red flag to the Prime Minister. But nonetheless, the Prime Minister went on and made the appointment to his cabinet. The Prime Minister should now be coming out and giving us an explanation of these matters.
The PM said he didn't know. He just didn't know until last week the gravity of the situation. Are you suggesting he's lying?
How could the Prime Minister not have known about the fact of the investigation when Mr Zahawi declared it in July? Which particular aspect is the Prime Minister saying he didn't know about? Which aspect is he saying he did know about? That's what the Prime Minister has to come out now and declare.
So are you saying he's lying?
Well, I don't know which bit the Prime Minister is saying he didn't know about. It may be the Prime Minister is saying he didn't know about the penalty until a particular time, in which case he should tell us. But it's inconceivable he didn't know what was in the ministerial declaration back in the July when he was appointing Mr Zahawi to cabinet in October.
But it could be a cock-up rather than a cover-up. It could have just slipped through the net.
Well, I certainly don't rule out the fact that the Prime Minister is utterly incompetent. That is true, given that we have, frankly, no public service anywhere in a better state now than we have had 13 years ago. The Prime Minister's incompetence I certainly would accept, but this is also about probity, it's about ethics, it's about integrity and professionalism, values the Prime Minister claims to adhere to, but clearly has not done in this case.
He appointed an ethics advisor. We didn't have one. He's got an ethics advisor who is independent. So he says as soon as he knew what was going on, rather than just sack Nadhim Zahawi, everybody is entitled to a trial, if you will. And as a result, he acted quickly. As soon as he got the report, yesterday morning, around about 7 o'clock, he sacked him within a matter of minutes.
But with respect, for a simple principle, OK, very simple, that those who are responsible for collecting our taxes shouldn't at the same point be seeking to avoid taxes. It's pretty simple. You don't need an investigation to come to a conclusion on that. And nearly 2 weeks ago now at Prime Minister's Questions, the Prime Minister actually said that the matter was closed as far as he was concerned and all questions had been answered. That's what he told the House of Commons at Prime Minister's Questions. Should have acted then instead of vacillated for a couple of weeks as he has.
What should happen to Nadhim Zahawi now?
Well, that's a matter for him, frankly, and the Conservative Party. What concerns me is the conduct of government. We have a government at the moment that is completely consumed with its own internal problems, has a sense of decay on it, is not doing the things it should be to govern. Like this evening, for example, in my role as a Shadow International Trade Secretary, I'll be hosting a trade reception here in Westminster. I'll have over 100 ambassadors and high commissioners. I will have over 200 businesses, putting them together, so providing a platform to create the networks to open up trade markets around the world. That's what I'm doing to show what a Labour government could be like. The government that is actually in office is, I'm afraid, out of ideas and falling apart.
Talk to me about defence. I'm not sure if you've seen our Deborah Haynes report this morning. Our army is not in a good state, according to a senior general from the United States. How would Labour fund the defence budget differently?
Well, firstly, what we've seen is extraordinarily worrying, and I know it's a Sky investigation that has brought this forward. And it really does now raise serious questions about the Conservative Party's ability to keep our country safe. Now, what would Labour do? Labour, on our first day in office, would order a full defence and security review, because our position is that the armed services have to be at a size to have a capability that matches the nature of the threats we face. That's what we actually need. We need to make that assessment soon. I know, Kay, you've been out to Ukraine recently. We need to be putting a long-term plan in place in respect of Ukraine as well. We've had a cross-party consensus that's very valuable and will continue about making sure that Ukraine gets the assistance it needs. But it can't be on this ad hoc, short-term basis. We also need to put in a long-term plan to ensure that Putin fails in Ukraine.
It's a simple question. Would you provide more money?
We will provide more money for across public services by growing the economy.
Yeah, but the defence budget is not big enough at the moment. Would you be providing more money, and what sort of percentage would you be offering? 3%?
Well, in respect of that, we have to make that assessment about what the nature of the threats are. And with respect from opposition, quite rightly, there's information that shouldn't be shared with us as an opposition. That's information that's made available to government. When we get into government and we see that, we will then have that comprehensive review to look at where those threats are. And then we'll look at right across our armed services, whether it's on land, sea, or indeed air, and make sure that they are at the capability, at the level of readiness that they need to be. And the money that is required, we will raise by growing the economy, which is why the Conservatives have failed so badly over the last 13 years.
OK, and if more money is needed from day one, a Labour government would make that available?
A Labour government will put as its first priority keeping our country safe, and we will do what is required for that.
OK, it's good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.